Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're unpacking the truly unbelievable true story of the world's most famous comic company. Now, if you're a pop culture fan or even a business history buff, you probably think you know Marvel, right? But the actual corporate evolution behind your favorite heroes? Well, it's a wild saga of shell companies, frantic trend chasing, total near collapse, and ultimately, spectacular reinvention. Okay, let's dive straight into this. The central question we're tackling today is this. How exactly did a bankrupt comic publisher, one that was literally forced to sell off its best assets just to keep the lights on, manage to turn around and become a $30 billion cinematic empire? To really understand Marvel's incredible journey of adaptation and survival, we have to go all the way back to the very beginning. So to make sense of this massive 80-year history, we're going to break it down into 5 quick chapters. The timely golden age, surviving the Atlas era, the Marvel Revolution, bankruptcy and rebirth, and finally, the cinematic universe era. If you've ever been totally confused by Marvel's early history and their different names, this timeline should clear it up. They went from Timely Publications to Atlas Comics and then finally to Marvel. But the absolute crucial thread connecting all of this, it was all built by one guy, a publisher named Martin Goodman. And his highly unusual business strategy is what set this entire universe in motion. Chapter 1. The Timely Golden Age, Chasing the Superhero Trend. So, in 1939, pulp magazine publisher Martin Goodman saw this exploding new trend of comic books and the early success of superheroes over at DC. So he decides to pivot. He sets up Timely Publications, operating through a crazy, complex web of shell companies that all shared the exact same staff just to chase this new superhero fad. And you know what? It completely worked. They sold a staggering 900,000 copies of their very first release, Marvel Comics #1, which featured Carl Burgos' android Human Torch and Bill Everett's Submariner. It was a massive, immediate hit. Now, right in the middle of this boom in 1939, Goodman hired his wife's teenage cousin, a kid named Stanley Lieber, basically just as an errand boy. Shortly after, industry legends Joe Simon and Jack Kirby created Captain America, they actually ended up leaving the company. So by 1941, young Stanley, who was now writing under the pen name Stan Lee, stepped right up and became the interim editor of the whole comics line. But as we'll see, the golden age of heroes wasn't going to last forever. Which brings us to Chapter 2. Surviving the Atlas Era, Chaos and Distribution Disaster. After World War II wrapped up, public interest in superheroes just fell off a cliff. To survive, Goodman's strategy was simply to chase whatever was currently selling. So, operating under the new Atlas Comics Globe logo in the 1950s, they pivoted wildly. They pumped out horror, suspense, westerns, funny animals, and yes, literally even Bible stories. Basically, if it was playing at the local drive-in or showing on TV, Atlas was actively copying it. But this strategy of just flooding the newsstands with sheer volume, it was about to completely backfire. In 1957, a catastrophic distribution disaster struck the company. The massive distribution network that Goodman relied on completely folded overnight. Left with absolutely no other options, Goodman was forced to go to independent news. Now here's the kicker. Independent News was a distributor owned by his direct rival, DC Comics. He had to beg them to carry his books. They agreed, but they slapped him with a brutal restriction, a strict limit of just 8 titles per month. Their massive output plummeted from 60 books a month down to almost nothing. This severe downsizing led to a legendary and, honestly, pretty hilarious anecdote from Stan Lee. See, he had been buying up freelance art that he wasn't particularly thrilled with, and as he later recalled, quote, "I kind of hid them in the closet, and Martin found them and I think he wasn't too happy," end quote. Goodman actually forced Stan to use up all that hidden, already paid-for inventory before he was allowed to hire any artists back. At this point, the company was essentially on life support, facing total industry obscurity. Chapter 3. The Marvel Revolution, Setting the Trend. By 1961, with their backs firmly against the wall, Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, and Steve Ditko decided to try something entirely new instead of just chasing trends. Rather than writing about perfect, flawless gods with secret identities, they introduced a groundbreaking superheroes in the real-world formula. Starting with the Fantastic Four and very soon after, Spider-Man, they gave readers bickering teammates, heroes plagued with crushing self-doubt, and characters dealing with everyday, mundane problems like paying rent. The audience connected with these relatable, flawed characters instantly. The idea spread like wildfire. The immense success of these characters led Goodman to finally solidify the company's long-fractured identity. In May 1963, they unified everything under the single, legendary Marvel Comics Group banner that we all know today. The modern Marvel era had officially arrived. Chapter 4, Bankruptcy and Rebirth, Licensing to Survive. Now, let's fast forward to the turbulent 1990s. Despite having a veritable cultural juggernaut on their hands, severe corporate mismanagement sent Marvel straight into Chapter 11 bankruptcy in 1996. To keep the lights on, they had to take some incredibly drastic steps. First, they merged with Toy Biz to stabilize their finances. But more importantly, they licensed out their absolute best A-list characters, like leasing Spider-Man to Sony and the X-Men to 20th Century Fox, just for an immediate infusion of cash. They survived, sure, but their once unified universe was now fractured across several different rival movie studios. Our final chapter, the cinematic universe era, the $30 billion empire. By 2005, a somewhat financially stabilized Marvel decided to take a huge swing. They were going to finance and make their own movies, launching Marvel Studios. But here's the incredible irony of all this. They had to build the entire foundation of the MCU using characters who, at the time, were widely considered B-list heroes, like Iron Man and Thor. Why? Simply because they didn't own the film rights to their own A-listers anymore. Because of that, they had to rely entirely on strong, character-driven, interconnected storytelling to make audiences fall in love with these lesser-known heroes. And wow, did that gamble pay off monumentally. This interconnected cinematic universe was such an unprecedented, massive success that in 2009, the Walt Disney Company stepped in. Disney purchased Marvel Entertainment for a staggering sum of $4 billion. It was an absolutely massive bet on a company that, just over a decade prior, was quite literally begging for cash in bankruptcy court. And this brilliantly illustrates how the rest of the story played out. Over the last decade, Disney's immense corporate power helped Marvel put its fractured universe back together. Spider-Man was brought into the fold through a highly unique sharing deal with Sony, and Disney's massive buyout of Fox finally regained the rights to the X-Men and the Fantastic Four. The icons were, at long last, back under one roof to create a $30 billion franchise. So as we wrap up this explainer, we're really left with a fascinating question. Marvel went from a desperate company that chased trends in the 1950s to the undisputed kingmaker that has defined global pop culture for the last 15 years. But in an era where audiences are starting to show real signs of franchise fatigue, what trend will they have to invent next to survive? Keep that in mind the next time you buy a ticket. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll catch you in the next one.